The clock read 9:47 p.m. when my only son looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're a rotten old man, Dad. Don't show up tomorrow." His bride-to-be, Madeline Carter, laughed from the couch, swirling her champagne like she'd just watched the evening's entertainment. I stood there in my clean gray suit, the one I'd bought just for their wedding, and felt something break deep inside me. I'd survived worse things in my life. Alcohol, grief, losing everything I built, but nothing prepared me for being humiliated by my own blood. My throat went dry, but I refused to let them see me fall apart. "You won't be seeing me again, son," I said quietly. Then I turned, walked out into the cold Austin night, and let the sound of her laughter echo behind me like nails in a coffin. The air outside was sharp with the kind of Texas chill that shows up just before spring. I got into my truck, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. Streetlights blurred through the windshield as I drove, not really seeing where I was going. My heart was thudding like it wanted to punch through my ribs. My son, my only child, had just thrown me away in favor of a woman who barely knew me, and yet thought she knew enough to judge. 6 hours earlier, I'd left work at True North Recovery, the center I founded 12 years ago after climbing out of hell myself. I'd stayed late helping a young man named Caleb, 23, detoxing from opioids. He'd asked me what forgiveness felt like peace that you didn't think you deserved. I told him, when I locked up, I felt proud, steady. I'd promised myself I wouldn't miss Tommy's rehearsal night. Wanted to hand him a small gift, a silver tie clip engraved with his mother's initials. She would have loved to see him walk down that aisle. When I got to his apartment, the first thing I noticed was the smell of money. Candles that probably cost $50 each. Wine glasses thin as paper, everything spotless. Madeline opened the door wearing a silk robe like she owned the place. "Mr. Hall," she said, not smiling. "Tommy didn't tell me you were coming." Her eyes ran over my jeans, my work boots, my folded shirt sleeves. I held out the small box with the tie clip. "Just wanted to wish you 2 luck tomorrow," I said. She took it, but didn't open it, just set it on the counter like a bill she didn't plan to pay. Tommy came out from the bedroom adjusting his tie, half smiling the way people do when they're stuck between 2 fires. "Dad, maybe next time just text me first." His voice sounded practiced, polite, but distant. I could smell the nerves on him, the way I used to smell whiskey on myself. "I didn't mean to intrude," I said. "Just wanted to drop by before the big day." Madeline tilted her head. "That's sweet. Not everyone gets to see their father sober at their wedding." Tommy shot her a look. I said nothing because silence sometimes protects your dignity better than words. But she kept going. "You run that recovery place, right? Must be rewarding, helping people like that." She said people like that, the way some say insects. I nodded. "They're good people fighting hard battles. Of course," she said, taking a sip of her drink, eyes never leaving mine. "Still, it must be exhausting carrying that kind of past everywhere you go." Tommy cleared his throat. "Madeline, that's enough." She laughed lightly. "What I'm just saying, not everyone could do it. Live in the shadow of old mistakes." I could have said plenty right then. Could have told her about the nights I nearly drank myself to death, about the wife who stayed until her heart gave out, about the son who used to say I was his hero. But I didn't. I just said, mistakes don't scare me anymore. She smirked. Maybe they should. The silence after that felt heavier than the air before a storm. Tommy rubbed his temples. "Dad, look, maybe it's better if you don't come tomorrow. It's already stressful," and I interrupted, keeping my voice even. "Your fiancé doesn't want me there." "It's not that," he said quickly. "It's just, she thinks it might be uncomfortable for her family. You know, with your background, my background. The word hit harder than any insult. Like everything I'd built since sobriety meant nothing next to a label I'd carried years ago. I stared at my son, the man I once carried out of a halfway house who'd cried in my arms when he hit his own rock bottom. "Tommy," I said slowly, "you know who I am better than anyone." He looked away. "Yeah, I do. That's the problem." For a moment I didn't recognize him. His voice was cold, detached, like a stranger's. Maybe Madeline had taught him that tone. Or maybe he just learned how to look down from watching her. "You're a rotten old man, Dad," he said finally. "You make everything about your recovery, your past, your pain. Not everything is a sermon." I felt the room tilt. My hands went numb, but my voice stayed steady. "You think I talk about recovery too much? Try losing everything because you didn't. Then see how quiet you stay." He sighed, shaking his head like I was some stubborn ghost that wouldn't move on. "Just don't come tomorrow, please." Madeline smiled, then the kind of smile that doesn't hide contempt. "You heard him. It's his day. Let's not make it about yours." I picked up my coat, nodded once, and walked out. The hallway light buzzed overhead, flickering like a bad memory. Behind me, I heard her laugh again, sharp, brittle, victorious. Out in the parking lot, I stopped beside my truck, rain starting to fall, the kind that smells like new asphalt and endings. I leaned on the door, trying to breathe. Maybe she'd won. Maybe I'd failed as a father. But deep down, something older, stronger, colder, was waking up the part of me that learned long ago not to fight with words, but with truth. As I drove home, the city blurred by in streaks of red and gold. I stopped at a gas station off I-35, the same one I used to visit during my worst nights, when the only company I had was the clerk and my own guilt. I bought black coffee and sat in the truck, staring at a photo taped to the dash, Tommy and me 10 years ago at his 5-year sobriety chip ceremony, both of us smiling like men who finally found peace. I thought about that moment tonight, about how recovery had given me a second chance at life, and how pride had just taken my son's first. Then I whispered to no one but the rain, "If I survived hell, once I can survive this too." The coffee went cold in my hands. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. I turned the key, started the engine, and drove into the storm, not realizing yet that the real battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The first time I met Madeline Carter, I mistook arrogance for nerves. It was 6 months before the wedding, a warm Sunday in late September. Tommy had called me that morning, sounding excited like a boy again. "Dad, I want you to meet someone," he'd said. "She's different." I didn't know what that meant, but I wanted to believe him. I drove over with a bottle of good wine and a bouquet of sunflowers, Margaret's favorite. When I walked into his apartment, the air smelled like expensive candles and something faintly artificial, sweet but hollow like a rented smile. Madeline stood up from the couch when I entered, tall, blonde, polished. Her eyes were the color of green glass and just as hard. She offered her hand halfway, then pulled it back before we touched. "Tommy didn't tell me you were coming," she said, glancing at my jeans and work boots. I smiled, used to being misjudged by first impressions. "I brought these for you," I said, handing her the flowers. She didn't take them. "Oh," she said, "how thoughtful." Then she placed them on the counter like something she didn't know what to do with. Tommy, bless him, tried to bridge the gap. "Dad, this is Madeline," he said nervously. "Madeline, my father, Richard Hall." She gave me that tight social smile people use when they've already decided they won't like you. "The one with the recovery centers, right?" she said. I nodded. "That's right." "That must be interesting," she said, voice dripping with polite discomfort. "Being around addicts all the time." "It's meaningful," I replied. "People deserve a second chance." She sipped her wine, eyes scanning my face. "I suppose. Some people just can't move on from their past. I should have let it roll off, but something in her tone twisted the knife. I'd met plenty like her before, people who think money cleans the soul better than humility. But for Tommy's sake, I smiled. Well, I've found that the past doesn't hurt you, unless you lie about it, I said. She blinked, didn't respond. The silence stretched thin and cold. When I left later that night, Tommy walked me to the door, embarrassed. She's just protective, Dad. Her family's owed money. They have their ways. I laughed softly. Old money doesn't excuse bad manners, son. Over the next few months, I watched my son drift. The Sunday calls stopped. When I did manage to reach him, his voice carried a new stiffness, like he was trying to sound older or smaller. One evening, I asked if he'd come by for dinner. He hesitated. Madeline's family doesn't really do casual dinners, he said. They keep things private. That word private sat heavy in my chest. There's a difference between private and secretive. By Christmas, I'd seen her 2 more times, once at a restaurant, where she made a show of paying the bill separately, and once at a charity event where she pretended not to see me at all. I told myself to let it go, that maybe I was overreacting. But fathers know. We can feel when something invisible starts eating at our sons. One afternoon, she came to my center unannounced. Said she wanted to see where Tommy came from. She arrived in a white SUV, heels clicking across the tile floor. I gave her a tour, showed her the therapy rooms, the meditation garden, the photos of clients who'd turned their lives around. She looked around politely, but there was a faint wrinkle in her nose, like the air offended her. When we stopped by the wall of framed success stories, she crossed her arms. It's impressive, she said. You've done well for someone who's been down there. I turned to her, voice calm. That's the thing about rock bottom, I said. It teaches you how to build solid foundations. For the first time, her smile faltered. There was something flickering behind her eyes, fear maybe, or recognition. She left in a hurry, saying she had another appointment. I watched her drive away, uneasy. That night, one of my employees, Carla, a counselor who'd worked in Dallas, mentioned something odd. You said her name's Carter, she asked. There was a Carter family in Dallas a few years back tied to some kind of foundation scam. Addiction recovery, ironically. I felt my stomach tighten. You sure? Pretty sure, she said. They disappeared after the press started asking questions. The next week, another whisper found its way to me. A patient's sister who worked in a pharmacy said she'd seen a woman matching Madeline's description, filling multiple prescriptions, different doctors, same last name. I brushed it off. At first told myself coincidences happen. But the unease grew like static in my chest. Tommy came by one evening to drop off some paperwork. I tried to bring it up gently. How's Madeline's family, I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Busy, he said. They don't like to mix business and personal life. What business are they in again? I asked. Real estate. Investments. You ever been to their offices? No, they're private. That word again. Private. When he left, I stayed sitting in my office long after dark. The neon sign outside True North Recovery flickered in the window, casting soft light over my desk. I thought about all the people who'd come through these doors, men and women who'd been broken, lied to, stolen from, abandoned. I thought about how every lie starts small, polite, wrapped in good intentions. I could feel one forming around my own son, invisible, but tightening. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a photo of Tommy when he was 10. His front teeth missing his mother's arm around him, both of them laughing. I ran my thumb over the picture and whispered, I promised her I'd protect him. Outside, rain began to fall again, tapping lightly against the glass. Somewhere across town, Madeline was probably planning centerpieces and seating charts, while my son was pretending everything was fine. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and let the sound of the rain settle the anger. When I opened them, I took out a notebook and wrote down a single sentence: trust the signs. I didn't know it yet, but that night marked the beginning of the end. The moment a father's love quietly turned into suspicion, and the truth began its slow climb to the surface. I've been called a lot of things in my life: a drunk, a failure, a sinner. But a rotten old man, that one stuck to the bone. The words kept echoing as I sat in my office that night, the neon sign outside humming soft and steady, casting pale light across the certificates on my wall. True North Recovery glowed in green against the rain-soaked glass. I'd built that name from nothing. From 12 years of clawing my way out of the dark one sober day at a time. Now my son thought it meant nothing. On the shelf above my desk sat a photo I could never bring myself to move. Margaret, my late wife, and Tommy when he was 5. He was missing a front tooth, holding a soccer ball bigger than his head. Margaret's hand was on his shoulder, her smile soft, full of that quiet faith she carried like a secret. I used to look at that photo and feel pride. Tonight I felt distance, like they were both worlds away. 13 years ago, I'd nearly lost everything. Back then, I was 45, an exhausted construction foreman who drank before sunrise and lied before noon. The night that changed everything started with a crash metal glass, my own voice screaming as the truck spun off the road. I woke up in a hospital bed with my ribs bruised and my wife sitting beside me holding my hand, like she wasn't sure if she should let go. "You either get clean," she said, her voice steady, "or you lose us forever." That night, I didn't argue. Maybe I was too tired to fight. Or maybe for the first time, I wanted to live. Rehab was hell. Withdrawal stripped me raw, left me shaking, sweating, begging for something to numb the shame. But Margaret came every week, sat beside me through group therapy, sometimes silent, sometimes reading out loud from her old prayer book. I still remember her favorite line: "To walk through the fire and not burn is not a miracle, it's practice." When I left treatment 6 months later, I stayed behind as a volunteer. At first, I scrubbed bathrooms, fixed leaky pipes, mowed the grass, anything to keep busy. Then I started sitting in on meetings, listening, sharing, helping. People saw that I didn't preach. I told the truth. That was the difference. By the 5th year, I'd saved enough to open my own recovery center. Margaret came up with the name. True North, she said, because no matter how lost people get, they need a compass to find their way back. We started small, 6 beds, 1 counselor, and a whole lot of faith. The day I hung that sign out front, I remember her standing beside me, smiling. "You see," she whispered, "you're not a drunk anymore. You're a builder again." For a while, life was good. We ran the center together. Tommy, fresh out of college, helped with paperwork, sometimes even joined group sessions. He used to call me his hero. "You turned pain into purpose," he said once. "That's what I want to do someday." Then the cancer came. It started in Margaret's lungs, quiet and merciless. Within a year, she was gone. The last thing she said to me before she died was, "Promise me you'll never let shame win again." I promised. And I kept that promise. I poured everything I had into True North, into every broken soul who walked through those doors. For a while, Tommy did too. But somewhere along the line, he started to drift. Maybe grief found him differently. Maybe the world taught him that quiet strength doesn't trend well on social media. When Tommy landed his engineering job, he told me I didn't need to worry about him anymore. "You've done your part, Dad," he said, hugging me tight. I didn't realize it then, but it was the beginning of him pulling away. He started dating Madeline not long after. The first few months he talked about her like she hung the moon. "She's got ambition, Dad," he said. "She's disciplined. You'd like her." I wanted to. But when I finally met her, something inside me went cold. Over time, I saw the change in him, small things at first. He stopped mentioning the center, stopped coming by on Sundays. When I called, he'd answer with one-word replies. Then one day, he asked me not to talk about recovery around her. It makes her uncomfortable, he said. She's private about family stuff. Private. That word again. Always the shield people use to hide rot. I remember sitting alone in my office after that call, watching one of my patients, Marcus, a 24-year-old kid with trembling hands, walk across the courtyard toward his therapy group. He'd told me the week before he was scared his girlfriend's parents would find out about his past. They'll make her choose Mr. Hall, he said. What if she picks them? I told him. Son, the people who really love you won't make you a secret. Now I sat there thinking how cruelly ironic that was. Later that night I was closing up when I found Margaret's old voice recorder in the top drawer of my desk. She used to record her reflections for new patients. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room soft and steady, as I remembered. The real relapse isn't about the drug. It's when you forget who you are. Her words hit harder than any whiskey ever had. Maybe I'd been sober for 12 years, but tonight I felt the tremor of something else, doubt, guilt, fear. Not of losing myself, but of losing the only person who once made me believe I'd found redemption. I looked at the photo of Margaret again and whispered, I didn't forget who I am, honey. But I think he did. The next morning, I arrived early to the center. The sun was barely up the sky, a pale pink over the Austin skyline. I brewed a pot of coffee, then sat in the quiet lobby flipping through patient files. The smell of disinfectant coffee and clean air felt like home. For all my flaws, I'd built something good, something real. When the phone rang, I almost didn't answer. It was Tommy. His voice sounded tense. Dad, listen. About last night. Madeline says she wants to do something formal for the families before the wedding. Maybe dinner next week. A dinner, I asked. With her parents? Yeah, he said. They want to meet you properly. Can you be on your best behavior? I stared at the phone, stunned. I'm always on my best behavior, son. He hesitated, then said, just don't talk about recovery stuff too much, okay? Her family's traditional. Traditional, I repeated. As in judgmental. Dad, please, he said. Just keep it light, for me. All right, Tommy, I said finally. For you. When I hung up, I didn't feel anger. I felt resolve. Whatever this family was hiding, I was going to find out, because if I didn't, my son was going to walk into a lie wearing a tuxedo. I looked up at the glowing sign outside the window, True North, and said quietly, time to use my compass again. They said the rehearsal dinner was just a formality. But the moment I stepped into that restaurant, I knew it was something else, a test I hadn't agreed to take. The place was called Bastille at the Creek, one of those fine dining spots where the lighting is so soft it hides the truth. Crystal chandeliers hung over tables, dressed in linen waiters moved like shadows, and the scent of truffle oil mixed with fake laughter. I could feel eyes turn when I walked in, curious, polite assessing. I didn't belong to this crowd, and they wanted me to know it. Tommy greeted me near the entrance, stiff in his tailored suit, looking both proud and nervous. Dad? You made it, he said, forcing a smile. I handed him a small box wrapped in brown paper. Cufflinks, I said. Your mom gave me mine the night before our wedding. His smile faltered for just a moment before he took it. Thanks, he said quietly. Come on, everyone's waiting. He led me through the room toward a long mahogany table gleaming under gold light. At the head sat Madeline's parents, Edward and Vivian Carter, and their carefully curated relatives. They rose when I approached, each movement too rehearsed, too smooth. Edward offered a hand. Richard Hall, he said, with practiced warmth. Tommy's told us so much about you. Good things, I hope, I said, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes were scanning, judging. Vivian leaned forward, her jewelry catching the light like tiny knives. "We've heard wonderful things about your work," she said. The hesitation before work told me everything. When the waiter asked for drink orders, I said, "Just water, thank you." Vivian smiled thinly, still avoiding temptation. "How admirable." Edward chuckled politely. "Yes, discipline is important." I smiled back, keeping my voice calm. Some of us learn the value of control the hard way. Others are just born lucky. That earned me a few polite coughs and an uncomfortable silence. Tommy looked down, fiddling with his napkin. Dinner began with oysters, then steak no one really ate. The conversation floated over topics like stocks art auctions and summer homes in the good parts of California. I nodded when spoken to, but mostly listened. I've learned that people who talk too much about class usually don't have any. Madeline dominated the conversation, laughing too loudly, complimenting everyone too easily. Every time she said my family, I caught a slight twitch in her father's jaw, like the words were borrowed. At one point, Edward turned to me. "Tommy tells us you run, what is it, a rehabilitation business, a recovery center," I said. "True North Recovery. We help people find their footing after addiction." Vivian tilted her head, smiling with false sweetness. "That must be rewarding, dealing with those kinds of people." "They're not those kinds of people," I replied evenly. "They're people trying to get better, same as the rest of us." She waved her hand, dismissing it like she was swatting a fly. Of course. Very noble." I noticed how Madeline's cousins exchanged quick glances, whispering behind half smiles. It wasn't what they said it was, what they thought they didn't have to say out loud. I'd been in construction sites, bar rooms, halfway houses, and courtrooms. I knew that look. The one that said, "He doesn't belong." When dessert came, Vivian leaned closer across the table. "Tommy, dear," she said, her voice syrupy, "you must be so proud of how far you've come, considering everything. Considering what I asked, even though I already knew." Vivian's lips twitched. "Oh, I just mean, well, coming from a background with certain challenges." "You mean addiction," I said. "Yes," she replied quickly, smiling as if she'd paid me a compliment. "It's inspiring, really. How people can rebuild themselves even from such unfortunate roots." The table went quiet. One of the cousins snickered softly. Tommy muttered something under his breath, but no one caught it. Then Madeline chimed in, her tone honeyed and cruel. "Mom just means it's admirable that you turned pain into a business." I looked at her steady. "Pain turned into purpose isn't a business," I said. "It's a legacy." She leaned back, smirking. "Sure, if that helps you sleep at night." For a second, I almost lost my temper. But 12 years of sobriety teaches you one thing: you never win when you fight small people on their level. So I smiled instead, a slow, measured smile that made her blink. "I sleep fine," I said. "Guilt's a young person's game." Tommy shifted in his seat, face flushed. "Dad, please," he said under his breath. "Not tonight." I set my fork down. "Of course," I said, turning to Vivian. "Please go on. Tell me more about your family business." Edward cleared his throat. "Carter and Associates. Real estate development in Dallas." "Impressive," I said. "Which projects?" His pause lasted half a second too long. "Oh, various ones, mostly private clients." "Which areas?" I asked. He smiled thinly. "We prefer to keep those details confidential." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of water. "Understandable. Privacy is important." I saw his wife glance at him with a flicker of panic before she smoothed her face again. When the dinner ended, guests began to mingle near the bar. I stepped outside to get some air. The night was cool, the air heavy with the scent of cedar and rain. Through the window, I could see the Carters laughing, performing. I turned to head to my truck when I heard a voice, one of the younger men who'd been at the table talking on his phone. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "The agency said we'd get paid by Monday." Agency. The word hit me like a spotlight. I stopped half hidden in the shadow of a column and listened. "Yeah, Prestige acting something?" "No, they already wired the deposit. 3 months prep, then the event." He laughed. "Easiest gig I've ever had." He hung up, turned and froze when he saw me standing there. "Evening," I said. He forced a grin, nodding before slipping back inside. I stood there for a long time, watching the lights flicker through the rain-specked glass. My pulse slowed. The humiliation from earlier began to fade, replaced by something colder clarity. When I finally walked to my truck, I didn't feel small anymore. I felt focused. By the time I got home, the rain had started again, tapping softly on the windshield. I sat in the driveway, the car engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with a message from Tommy. "Thanks for coming tonight. Sorry if it was awkward." I typed a reply, then deleted it. Instead, I whispered to the dark, "You have no idea what awkward looks like yet." Inside, I took off my coat, poured a cup of coffee, and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and typed Carter & Associates Dallas Real Estate. No official listings, no corporate records, nothing but an old bankruptcy notice from 5 years ago. I leaned back, feeling that familiar calm of a man who's seen a pattern before, the moment when denial gives way to evidence. On a scrap of paper, I wrote one sentence, "They're lying." Then I closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and let the rain keep me company, until the house was quiet enough to hear my own thoughts. Tomorrow, I decided I'd start digging. The next morning, I woke before dawn the way I always did back when I was rebuilding my life from scratch. The sky outside was still gray, the kind of color that makes you wonder if the sun will bother showing up at all. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my notebook. The first line on the page from last night stared back at me. "They're lying." I underlined it twice. The laughter from that dinner still echoed in my head, their polished voices, the way they said "addict" like it was a disease you could catch from sitting too close. But something else had been gnawing at me since I overheard that phone call. Agency. He said the word like it was normal, like he wasn't supposed to hide it. By 7 a.m., I was in my office at True North, reviewing patient files, but not really reading them. My thoughts kept circling back to Madeline and her perfect family. Their stories didn't line up, their details never matched. Even their body language was off, like people performing in a scene they hadn't rehearsed enough. I poured another cup of coffee, turned to my computer, and started searching again. Carter & Associates Dallas Real Estate. Nothing. Edward Carter Investments, Texas. Still nothing. I tried every variation I could think of, even checked the state's corporate registry. Not a single trace. No business filings, no property taxes, no employees. They were ghosts. The front door creaked open. Sam Heller, one of my oldest success stories, walked in carrying a box of donated books. "Morning, boss," he said. "You look like you haven't slept." "I've been thinking," I said. "You ever heard of a family in Dallas named Carter Real Estate types?" Sam frowned, setting down the box. "Carter, yeah. That name rings a bell. There was a couple years ago running some kind of fake charity scam, said it was for addiction recovery, I think. Used actors for testimonials. My buddy almost donated before the news broke." I looked up sharply. "Actors?" "Yeah," he said. "The whole thing collapsed when someone recognized one of their volunteers from a car commercial." He laughed a little. "People will believe anything if it's wrapped in luxury." I sat back in my chair, pulse steady but heavy. "Do you remember the name of that charity?" Sam shook his head. "Nah. Something fancy. Foundation this, rehabilitation that." But I do remember the woman who ran it was blonde, early 30s, always wore white. Said her name was Maddie or Maddie something. The air in my lungs went still. After Sam left, I sat there for a long while, staring at the wall. Then I picked up my phone and called Elaine Brooks, an old friend of Margaret's and a licensed psychiatrist. She'd helped me set up our first counseling program years ago. "Richard?" She said, her voice warm but wary. "You sound like you're digging for something again." "I am," I said. "I need a background check on someone named Madeline Carter. She's supposedly from Dallas, works in real estate, but something's off. I can't find any medical or professional record under that name." There was a pause on the other end. "Give me a few hours," she said. "I'll look through my old network from the hospital system. If she's ever filed for prescriptions or employment, she'll show up somewhere." "Thanks, Elaine," I said. "Be careful. Just keep it quiet." "I always do," she replied. By afternoon, the air outside had turned heavy and warm. I was locking up when I heard footsteps behind me. Dad Tommy's voice called. I turned to see him standing by the door, hands shoved into his pockets. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired you get from work, the kind that comes from carrying too many lies. "You've been digging into Madeline's family," he said flatly. "Who told you that?" "She did," he said. "She's upset. She thinks you're trying to sabotage the wedding." I sighed. "I'm trying to protect you," from what he snapped. "From being happy, from being fooled." I said, my voice calm. "Tommy, I know you love her, but something isn't right. I looked into her family. Nothing checks out." He laughed once, short and bitter. "You actually hired someone, didn't you? You can't stand that. I'm marrying someone from a better family. You've turned your recovery thing into some crusade against everyone who has money. That's not what this is about." "Then what is it, Dad? You jealous? Afraid people might think I finally outgrew you?" That one hurt. But I didn't flinch. "You think respect comes from hiding where you come from? You're wrong. It comes from standing up when people like her try to make you feel small." He ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. "She's been under a lot of stress. Okay, you keep judging her like you know everything. Not everyone wants to talk about pain all the damn time." I met his eyes. "She doesn't want to talk about it because she's living it. You just can't see it yet." He took a step closer, his jaw tight. "Stop psychoanalyzing my life. You're not my sponsor, Dad." "No," I said softly. "I'm your father. That's why I'm not giving up." He shook his head and turned to leave. "You don't know her like I do." I watched him walk away, that familiar ache in my chest, the same one I felt when I buried his mother. I wanted to yell, to shake him, to tell him everything I'd seen. But sometimes the more you push, the faster they run. That night I stayed late at the center, locking the doors one by one. When I reached my office, a figure was waiting by the window. Paul Simmons, old friend, retired detective, the kind of man who still carried truth in his pockets, like bullets. "You wanted me to dig into someone," he said. I did. He handed me a thick envelope. I opened it, scanning the documents under the desk lamp. My throat went dry. 6 contracts from an agency called Prestige Acting Solutions Los Angeles. Payment amounts, $1,500 a day. Duration 3 months. Names matching Edward Vivian and 4 others. The signature at the bottom of each contract, M. Carter Holdings, LLC. "She's paying actors," I said quietly. Paul nodded. "Not just for the wedding. There's correspondence going back months. Dinner parties, charity events, introductions. The whole family's a production." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "And Tommy has no idea." "None," Paul said. "You were right to trust your gut. This isn't arrogance, it's fraud. But there's something else." I traced her accounts. She's been visiting multiple pharmacies across Texas. Same prescriptions, different doctors, Looks like opioids and stimulants. Classic doctor's shopping pattern. I felt my heart sink. How bad she's smart. Keeps doses small, rotates names. But yeah, it's bad. And if your son marries her, he's stepping into a legal nightmare. I closed the folder, stared at the window. Outside, the city lights blurred through the glass. "Thank you, Paul," I said quietly. "Don't tell anyone yet. Let me handle it." He gave me a long look. "Be careful, Richard. People like this, they don't just lie. They perform. And the curtain only falls when someone pulls it down." After he left, I sat there alone, the papers spread across my desk like pieces of someone else's life. My anger was gone, replaced by something colder resolve. I wrote one more note in my journal: the truth doesn't hide. Lies do. Then I turned off the light and walked out into the night, knowing tomorrow I'd have to decide just how far I was willing to go to protect my son from her, from himself, and from the illusion he thought was love. The next day felt like standing on the edge of something I couldn't yet see, the kind of silence before a storm when even the wind holds its breath. I hadn't slept. My mind kept replaying Paul's words over and over. Actors, doctor shopping, fraud. It wasn't just deception anymore. It was danger. My son was about to marry a stranger wrapped in silk. By 8 a.m., I was on the phone with Elaine Brooks. She didn't even say hello. "Richard," she said, "you were right. I cross-referenced prescription records in the state database. Madeline's name appears under 4 different physicians, all writing for controlled substances: oxycodone, Percocet, Adderall." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "So she's an addict," Elaine sighed. "Clinically, yes. But more than that, she's hiding it. All prescriptions filled within overlapping dates, multiple pharmacies, different addresses. That's deliberate concealment." "Would the board consider that fraud?" I asked. "If she's obtaining controlled substances under false pretense?" "Absolutely." I closed my eyes. The irony burned. The same woman who'd mocked me for my past was drowning in her own. Elaine's voice softened. "You can't fix her, Richard. Your priority has to be Tommy." "I know," I said. "And I intend to." After I hung up, I sat there staring at the wall of framed certificates behind my desk. Every one of them represented years of clawing my way back from the bottom, proof that recovery wasn't about perfection, it was about truth. And now that truth had a new test. At noon, I called Paul. "I need you to verify something," I said. "If M. Carter Holdings is her shell company, where's the money coming from?" "Already ahead of you," he replied. "The payments are routed through an account under S. Morrison Financial Services, registered in Phoenix. No tax records, no employees. A ghost entity. I'll dig deeper, but something tells me she's laundering through it." "Morrison," I repeated. "That's her mother's maiden name." "Bingo," Paul said. "Looks like the apple doesn't fall far from the fake tree." I didn't laugh. My chest felt heavy, but beneath that weight was clarity. "Thanks, Paul. Keep everything documented." Quietly. When I hung up, I looked out the office window. The parking lot shimmered under the Texas sun, hot enough to bend light. I saw Marcus, one of my younger clients, sitting on the curb waiting for his ride. He waved when he saw me. I waved back, but my thoughts were miles away. I remembered something my sponsor Jerry told me 12 years ago. When you stay sober long enough, life stops testing your willpower and starts testing your integrity. I hadn't fully understood it then. Now I did. This wasn't about saving Tommy from heartbreak. It was about proving that truth still had a place in a world built on illusion. That evening, I drove to Tommy's apartment. The parking lot was full of luxury cars, Bentleys, Teslas, the kind of showpieces people lease to impress each other. Through the window, I could see people inside setting up decorations, laughing. Rehearsal dinner prep, probably. I knocked. Madeline opened the door, still in makeup from some spa appointment, her expression tight. "Mr. Hall," she said. "What a surprise. I just need to speak with my son. He's busy." I stepped inside anyway. Tommy came out from the kitchen holding a wine glass, looking startled. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "5 minutes," I said. "That's all." Madeline folded her arms. "If this is another lecture about my family, it's about you," I said sharply. "And the lies you've built around him." Tommy's voice rose. "Dad." But I didn't stop. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I know about the acting agency. I know about the fake contracts, the shell company, the pills. Don't bother denying it." Madeline's face went still, her smile disappearing like a light switch flipped off. Tommy blinked. "What are you talking about?" "Your fiancée," I said, slowly, has been paying actors to pretend to be her family. She's also been obtaining prescriptions illegally. I have documentation. She's not who she says she is, son." He stared at me, shaking his head. "That's ridiculous." "Check the facts," I said, handing him the paper. "Names, amounts, agency dates. It's all there." Madeline's voice cracked. "This is harassment. He's obsessed with my family." I turned to her. "You mean your hired family?" Tommy slammed his hand on the counter. "Enough. You can't come in here and accuse her like this." "She's using you," I said. "You just don't want to see it." Madeline stepped forward, her voice dropping into a hiss. "You think people will believe a washed-up addict over me? You're pathetic." For a moment, everything went quiet. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to stop. I looked at her and said calmly, "I've been called worse by better liars." She turned to Tommy, grabbing his arm. "Make him leave." Tommy's eyes were glassy with confusion and anger. "Dad, please go. You're ruining this." I took a deep breath. "I'm not ruining it, Tommy. I'm trying to stop you from walking into a life built on rot." He pointed to the door. "Out, now." I held his gaze. "Someday you'll remember this moment, and when you do, you'll realize it wasn't anger you felt, it was fear." Madeline smirked. "Maybe you should focus on your own failed marriage instead of mine." I didn't answer. I just looked at my son one last time. "When you find out who she really is, I'll still be here. But you might not want me then." Then I walked out. The air outside was cool and sharp, the kind that clears your head but cuts a little too deep. I got into my truck and just sat there, staring at the reflection of their apartment lights in the windshield. I thought about Margaret, how she would have handled this. She would have been softer, probably. Kinder. But she also would have told me the same thing she did the day I left rehab. Don't let people's lies make you doubt your truth. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed. A text from Paul. "Update found full contracts and bank transfers. Forwarding digital copies now." This is Big Richard. Might want to sit down. Attached were PDFs, emails between Madeline and the acting agency. Phrases like consistent backstory, avoid details about location rehearsal for social events. She'd built her entire identity like a film set, perfect on camera hollow behind the scenes. I sat there reading until my vision blurred. My son was about to marry an illusion. When I finally drove home, the city felt eerily quiet. I parked in my driveway and killed the engine, but didn't get out. I just stared at the porch light, flickering faintly. Inside, everything was dark except the photo wall. Margaret Tommy as a boy me in the early days of the center. All those years of rebuilding from rubble. And somehow, I was right back where I started, trying to save my family from falling apart. I whispered into the empty car. I tried Maggie. God knows I tried. Then I reached for my phone and texted Paul back. "Meet me at the club tomorrow. Bring everything." We're ending this before the wedding. The message sent, I finally stepped out into the night. The wind carried the faint smell of rain, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. By Friday afternoon, the sky had that strange, heavy glow that comes before a storm. The wedding was 24 hours away. I sat in my truck outside Tommy's apartment, the folder of documents on the passenger seat beside me. Inside were the contracts, the bank records, the prescription logs, every lie I could prove printed in black and white. I'd told myself I was here to protect my son. But truthfully, I was here to give him one last chance to open his eyes. I walked up the steps and knocked. It took a while before the door opened. Madeline stood there, perfect as always, hair-smooth lipstick, flawless smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Mr. Hall," she said coolly. "You must be lost. I'm right where I need to be," I said. "Is my son home?" She tilted her head, feigning pity. "He's busy. You really shouldn't keep showing up uninvited. It's embarrassing." I smiled faintly. "Then let's make this the last time." Tommy's voice came from the hallway. "Dad," he appeared behind her. Sleeves rolled up, face tired. He looked older than his 29 years. "What are you doing here? I need to talk to you," I said, holding up the folder. "Alone," Madeline's smile flickered. "Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of me," I said quietly. "Not this." Tommy hesitated, then motioned me inside. Madeline rolled her eyes and walked toward the living room, pretending not to listen, but clearly hanging on every word. I set the folder on the counter and looked at my son. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here to show you facts." He crossed his arms. "Dad, if this is about Madeline again, it's about you," I said, sliding the papers toward him. "And the truth." He opened the folder, flipping through the pages, emails, bank transfers, agency contracts. "What is this supposed to be? Proof," I said. "Your fiancé's family doesn't exist, Tommy. They're paid actors." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Jesus, you actually hired someone to dig into her background." "Do you even hear yourself?" "I had to," I said. "Nothing about them adds up. The company, the addresses, the names. It's all fake." He snapped the folder shut. "You're jealous. That's what this is. You can't stand that I'm marrying into a better family than the one you built." "Better," I said, trying to stay calm. "They're ghosts, son. Smoke and mirrors. And she's the one holding the lighter." He turned away, rubbing the back of his neck. "You think everyone's lying, Dad. You've been in recovery so long you can't trust anyone." "I trust you," I said softly. "That's why I'm here." He looked at me, then something breaking in his eyes. "You don't trust me. You never have. You think because I didn't go into your line of work, because I wanted a normal life, that I'm weak." "I think you're blind right now," I said. "And I think she's the one who did it to you." Before he could answer, Madeline's voice cut through the room like glass. "Tommy, this is exactly what I warned you about." She walked over, arms crossed, that perfect calm slipping just a little. "Your father can't stand not being the hero. He's trying to ruin us." I looked at her. "You can drop the act, Madeline. I know where your family came from." Her expression froze, then reshaped itself into mock amusement. "You really think people will believe a recovering addict over me?" Tommy snapped. "Enough, both of you." I kept my voice even. "She's lying to you, son." Madeline stepped closer to him, resting a hand on his arm. "Or maybe he's jealous that you found someone with real class. Someone who doesn't treat addiction like a badge of honor." That one hit hard. Tommy flinched, but he didn't say anything. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Class isn't something you can fake with jewelry and manners. It's what's left when everything else is gone. Madeline smirked. Well, then I suppose you'd be the expert in losing everything. Tommy slammed his fist on the table. Stop it, both of you. This is insane. He turned to me. Dad, I love you, but you can't keep doing this. You can't keep trying to control my life. I'm trying to keep you from destroying it, I said quietly. He shook his head. No, you're trying to make everything about you, about your redemption, your past, your recovery. You think you're some kind of prophet who can spot lies because you used to tell them. I swallowed hard. You think silence makes you respected, but it just makes you blind. Madeline let out a small laugh. He's projecting Tommy. That's what addicts do. They can't stand not being the center of attention. Tommy pointed toward the door. You need to leave. I looked at him for a long moment, searching for the boy I used to know, the one who believed in honesty, who held my hand in meetings and said he wanted to be strong like me. That boy was gone, buried under layers of charm and manipulation. As I turned toward the door, Tommy said, You just can't stop, can you? Always trying to fix things, always needing to be the hero. You're not saving me, Dad. You're ruining this. I stopped my hand on the doorknob. I'm not trying to save you, Tommy. I'm trying to make sure you don't spend your life inside a lie. His voice broke. You're just a rotten old man stuck in your past. The words hung in the air like smoke. I didn't look back. I just said, if being rotten means not pretending I can live with that. Then I walked out. The sun had already set, leaving the sky bruised purple and gray. I drove without turning on the radio, letting the hum of the tires drown out the ache in my chest. Every word, every glance, every wound from that conversation played back in my mind. I ended up at the cemetery. Margaret's headstone sat beneath a small oak tree and the grass damp from an earlier rain. I knelt beside it, set my hand on the stone. I tried, Maggie, I whispered. I did everything I could. For a while I just sat there listening to the wind move through the leaves. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Paul. Update. The payments doubled this week. Something's up. Might be a cover move. I stared at the screen, then at the empty sky. Then tomorrow, I said aloud, we end it. Back home, I took off my jacket, hung it neatly on the back of the chair, and placed the black suit I'd planned to wear for the wedding beside it. I looked at it for a long time. Then I whispered to the quiet room, You won't be seeing me again, son? The house creaked as rain began to fall again, steady and soft. I poured a glass of water, sat by the window, and watched the storm move in. Every drop on the glass caught a flicker of streetlight glowing for a moment before sliding away. Somewhere deep inside, a line had been crossed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was ready. Tomorrow the lies would end, one way or another. The rain started around midnight, soft at first, then steady. It drummed against the windows like an old friend tapping to remind me I wasn't done yet. I sat in my kitchen with the lights low, the black suit still hanging from the chair. The folder lay open in front of me, pages fanned out like pieces of a broken mirror. Every line, every date, every dollar told a story my son didn't want to believe. I poured myself a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago and whispered, All right, Maggie. One more fight. The house smelled like rain and dust. I hadn't slept, but I didn't need to. Clarity has a way of keeping you awake. I walked to the window and watched water bead down the glass cutting paths through the reflection of my own face. I looked older than I felt, lines deeper, hair grayer, but the eyes staring back were the same ones that refused to blink when life threw fire. Margaret once said, The world doesn't change when you shout at it, Richard. It changes when you refuse to bow. I went back to the table, spread the documents again, and started building my plan. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ending this the only way that made sense with truth and proof. I divided everything into 3 envelopes, one for Paul, one for Elaine, one for Tommy. Each had a note attached in my handwriting. If you doubt, read this. At 2 in the morning, I called Paul. He answered on the first ring. "You up?" I asked. "Do you even have to ask?" He said, his voice rough. "Bring everything tomorrow to the country club," I said, quietly. "Wait until I signal." He hesitated. "You sure you want to do this in public?" "I'm sure," I said. "It's the only language she understands, audience." "And Tommy," I paused. "He needs to see it with his own eyes. Otherwise, he'll just think I'm the villain in her story." "All right," Paul said. "Then we finish it tomorrow." After the call, I sat back listening to the rain. My mind drifted to all the faces I'd seen walk through the doors of True North. People who'd lied, stolen, broken everything, just to feed the lie one more day. I'd spent 12 years helping them crawl back out. Funny how I never thought I'd see the same sickness in my own family wearing diamonds instead of track marks. Around 3 a.m., the thunder rolled in. I grabbed my coat and stepped outside. The air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt and pine. I walked to the truck, but instead of driving, I stood there letting the rain soak through my shirt. I tilted my head back and whispered, "You were right, Maggie. Shame's only poison if you drink it." Inside again, I made myself another pot of coffee and sat down with my phone. I typed out an email and scheduled it to send at 7:59 a.m., 15 minutes before the ceremony was set to begin. The subject line was simple. "Before you attend the wedding, read this." Attached were scans of the documents, proof of the actors, the bank transfers, the fake company. I added one sentence at the end. "The truth deserves an invitation too." I pressed save and closed the laptop. For the first time all night, I smiled. Around 5 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Tommy. "Dad, I know we said some bad things. I just want tomorrow to be peaceful. Please don't do anything to make things harder." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying, "You have my word, son. I wasn't lying. I didn't plan to make anything harder. I just planned to make it real." As dawn crept over the horizon, I showered, shaved, and put on the black suit. The same one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral. The fabric still held the faint scent of cedar from her closet. I stood in front of the mirror, straightening the tie, and for a moment I saw her there. Behind me, soft smile, steady eyes. "Go tell the truth, Richard," she said. "You've always been good at that." By 7, I was driving. The streets glistened slick with leftover rain, the clouds parting just enough for streaks of pale gold light to break through. Austin looked cleaner after the storm, as if the night had washed away its pretense. I stopped by the cemetery on my way. The grass was damp, the air cool. I set a single white rose on Margaret's stone. "You'll want a front row seat for this one," I whispered. The drive to Desert Hill Country Club took 30 minutes. As I pulled into the lot, I saw luxury cars lined up, valet attendants in crisp uniforms. Guests were already arriving, women in pastel dresses, men in tuxedos too tight around the collar. I parked far from the entrance in the shadow of an oak tree and watched. Through the windshield, I could see Madeline greeting guests near the entrance, radiant as ever. Every movement measured, every smile rehearsed. Tommy stood beside her, stiff but polite, as if his soul had been pressed and ironed like his suit. She leaned in close to him, whispering something that made him nod. Even from a distance, I could tell she was in control. At 7:59, I pulled out my phone and tapped send. The email went out to every address on the guest list. Within seconds, my screen filled with delivery notifications. By 8:05, the first message came in Paul's text. "It's spreading." I could almost feel it ripple through the crowd. Murmurs, glances, phones lighting up. People started talking, whispering, checking their screens. Madeline's posture changed subtly. She felt it too. She reached for her purse, probably her own phone, and when she looked down, I knew the storm had finally arrived. I stepped out of the truck and walked toward the entrance, calm as a priest at confession. No anger left, just purpose. Inside the lobby, the air smelled like lilies and expensive perfume. Guests moved in small clusters, some pretending nothing was wrong, others staring openly at their phones. A woman whispered, "Is this real?" Another said, "It has to be. Look at the documents." I passed them quietly, my shoes clicking against the marble floor. As I reached the doorway of the main hall, I could see Tommy standing at the front, pale, confused, clutching his phone. Madeline stood beside him, trying to smile, but her hands were trembling. The music had stopped. The priest looked lost, the guests restless. I stayed in the doorway for a moment, taking it all in. 12 years sober. Hundreds of lives changed, and still I'd never seen a detox this sudden. I whispered to myself, "Let the truth do the talking." Then I stepped inside. The morning sun pushed through the tall windows, scattering light across the floor. The storm outside had passed, but inside one was just beginning. The morning air felt too calm, the kind of silence that hums before chaos. From the parking lot, I could see the country club glowing white under the early sun. Guests in pastel dresses and tailored suits moved toward the entrance phones, in their hands a confusion already rippling through their voices. My email had gone out 15 minutes ago. By the time I stepped out of my truck, I knew half the room would have already seen it. I straightened my tie and started walking. The air smelled of roses and wet grass. A valet boy glanced at me, then quickly looked away, as if he recognized me from the attachments now spreading through the crowd. I didn't blame him. I'd spent years helping people clean up their messes. Now I was the one carrying gasoline into a room full of candles. As I reached the door, I heard whispers drifting from inside. "Did you get that email?" someone murmured. "Who sends something like that on a wedding day? Is it true? Her family's fake too?" The rumors moved faster than I could walk. Inside the lobby buzzed like a disturbed beehive. People huddled in small circle screens, glowing voices, hushed. I caught a glimpse of my son at the far end of the hallway, shaking hands with a guest, his smile forced and thin. Madeline stood beside him, perfect as always. But her fingers clutched her purse like a lifeline. Mr. Hall, the coordinator, said nervously, approaching me. "Are you here for the groom's side?" "I'm here for the truth side," I said, brushing past her. The ballroom doors were open, revealing a sea of white linen crystal chandeliers and 100 faces pretending everything was fine. I took a seat near the back corner table 12, naturally. From there, I could see the entire room without being part of it. Guests were still filtering in, murmuring over what they'd seen. A woman near me whispered to her husband, Edward Carter, right? I just looked him up. There's no Edward Carter real estate anywhere in Dallas. The man frowned. Then who the hell did we just toast to last night? Madeline's so-called father stood near the bar, stiff and uneasy. His wife clung to her clutch like she was waiting for a cue. I recognized the look. It was the same nervous tension I used to see in addicts before a lie collapsed. Tommy appeared beside them, his voice low but sharp. "What's going on? Why are people whispering?" Madeline smiled tightly, touching his arm. "It's just gossip, sweetheart. Someone's playing a cruel joke. Someone sent an email to everyone," he said. "With contracts, photos, bank statements." Her expression didn't change, but the pulse at her neck gave her away. "Fake," she said. "All of it." He stared at her. "Then why are my friends texting me asking who your parents really are?" "Because people love drama," she said quickly, "and because your father can't stand seeing you happy." That was my cue. I stood and walked down the aisle between the tables. Heads turned as I passed. The whispers grew louder, sharper. By the time I reached the front, the only sound left was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Tommy turned his face pale. "Dad," he said, voice cracking. "What are you doing here?" "You told me not to come," I said calmly. "So I didn't come for the wedding. I came for the truth." Madeline stepped forward, still trying to smile. "This is inappropriate, Mr. Hall. You're causing a scene. Then let's make sure it's worth the ticket," I said. I turned toward the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. My name is Richard Hall, father of the groom. I promise I'll keep this brief. But before this ceremony continues, there are things you deserve to know." "Dad, stop," Tommy said. But his voice was shaking. Madeline tried to grab my arm. "He's not well," she said loudly, her smile trembling now. "He's been struggling lately." I pulled free and looked her in the eye. "You're right. I have struggled. I spent 12 years fighting for honesty, for dignity, for a life not built on lies. So I know what they look like." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This," I said, holding it up, "is a contract from Prestige Acting Solutions, Los Angeles. 6 hired actors. 1 to play your father, 1 to play your mother, and 4 others for color." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The man pretending to be her father went rigid, his hands twitching at his sides. I turned to him. "You're good, I'll give you that. The handshake, the stories, the fake business. But you should really update your headshots." Someone in the crowd laughed, nervous and stunned all at once. Madeline's face went white. "This is insane," she said. "You're lying." Paul appeared at the side of the room, briefcase in hand. He nodded at me. "Showtime." He walked up, opened the case, and laid out copies of the contracts on the head table. "Not lies," he said loudly. "Documents. Each signed by M. Carter Holdings, LLC. Payments totaling $75,000. The room exploded in murmurs. Guests reached for their phones, snapping photos, texting. The priest stepped back, unsure what to do. Tommy stood frozen. "Madeline," he whispered. "What is this?" she stammered. "They're for an event, a family marketing campaign." Paul cut in. "You mean the fake family marketing campaign? The one with scripted bios, fake businesses, and a cover story about old money?" Her voice cracked. "You have no right." "Actually," Paul said, "we do. Fraud's a public matter." Madeline turned to Tommy, desperate now. "Baby, listen to me." But he wasn't listening. His face had gone hollow. "Tell me it's not true," he said quietly. "Please." The actors began to move one by one, slipping out toward the exits. Someone near the door called out, "They're leaving?" Guests turned, watching them scatter. The man who'd played her uncle brushed past me, muttering, "Sorry, pal. It's just a job." Madeline's voice rose above the noise. "Stop them. This is all being twisted." I looked at her, calm as ever. "You twisted it yourself." She spun on me, eyes wild. "You think you've won? You've destroyed your son's wedding. How proud you must be." I took a step closer, lowering my voice so only she and Tommy could hear. "I didn't destroy it. You did. All I did was take off the mask." She glared at me, trembling. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'll sleep tonight." She turned to Tommy again, reaching for him, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said softly. "Just don't." For a long moment, the room was silent, except for the hum of cell phones recording everything. The truth had taken on a life of its own, and there was no putting it back in its box. I looked at my son, his face pale, his hands shaking. "I'm sorry, son," I said quietly. "But better an ugly truth today than a beautiful lie for the rest of your life." He didn't answer. He just stood there staring at the woman he thought he knew, while the crowd's whispers filled the space between them. As I turned to leave, I glanced back one last time. The actors were gone, the guests were scattered, and Madeline stood alone in her designer gown, surrounded by the ruins of her own performance. Outside, the sunlight broke through the clouds, sharp and blinding after the rain. I breathed in the clean air and whispered, "That's one storm down." Then I kept walking. There are moments in life when silence feels louder than thunder. That ballroom frozen in shock was one of them. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the clink of a glass tipping over the soft shuffle of someone's heels as they backed away. I didn't move. I wanted her to speak first, to see what kind of story she'd try to tell, now that the script had burned to ash. Madeline stood at the center of it all, white dress shimmering under the chandeliers, eyes darting between faces that had once smiled at her. Her hands shook around her champagne glass, the same one she'd lifted to mock me the night before. "These papers mean nothing," she said finally, her voice trembling. "Anyone could fake this." Paul stepped forward from the edge of the room, holding up another folder. "Then maybe these will mean something," he said. He opened it and began to read. 6 contracts signed by M. Carter Holdings, LLC, payments totaling $75,000 to Prestige Acting Solutions. Each listing roles as father, mother, aunt, uncle, and so on. Dates match social events attended by the bride and groom. The murmurs started again. Someone gasped. A man in the second row whispered, "That's the agency my company used for a commercial last year." Another guest raised a phone comparing headshots on the agency website to the faces in the room. They matched perfectly. Madeline's fake father tried to stand tall, but the color had drained from his face. The woman playing her mother looked ready to cry. "We didn't know it would go this far," she stammered. "We were just told it was an engagement celebration, not..." Madeline turned on her sharply. "Shut up!" The woman froze, then sank back into her chair. Tommy's voice cut through the noise. "Madeline," he said, quiet but deadly. "What are they talking about?" She swallowed hard. "It's a misunderstanding. I was planning something, an immersive theme for the wedding. A performance. You know how creative I am?" "Creative," I said softly. "That's one word for it." She ignored me, eyes desperate now. "Baby, please. You know I wouldn't lie to you." But the truth was already bleeding into the room faster than she could patch it. Paul laid another page on the table. "This is an email thread from 4 months ago," he said. "You wrote, 'Family backstory rehearsals going well. Make sure father avoids business details. Mother should wear understated jewelry. Need to appear old money, not flashy.'" Madeline lunged forward and snatched the paper from his hand. "This is harassment," she cried. "You can't use private messages like this." I met her eyes calm. "Private lies don't stay private forever." Her voice cracked. "You don't understand. I had to do it. His world. Your world would never accept me. I gave Tommy something you couldn't, a future without shame." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You don't erase shame by pretending it belongs to someone else." The room went completely silent again. Tommy took a small step back from her. His hands were shaking. "Tell me that's not true," he said. "Tell me you didn't hire people to pretend to be your family." Her eyes glistened. "Tommy, I did it for us. They were just props, temporary." He blinked, disbelief heavy in his voice. "Props, listen," she said, desperate now. "You don't know what it's like coming from nothing. I had to build a version of myself that people would respect." "You built it on lies," I said. She spun toward me. "And you built your redemption on pity. You talk about recovery like it's a crown, but it's just another way to control people. You use guilt to get applause." Tommy's voice cracked. "Stop it." She wouldn't. "You made him worship you, like everyone else in that stupid rehab cult. I just wanted something beautiful. Something that looked perfect for once in my life. Perfect doesn't survive sunlight, I said. Madeline's face twisted, her composure finally breaking. You think you're better than me? You're just an addict who got lucky. I didn't flinch. No. I'm an addict who stopped lying. At that, she broke. You don't know what it's like to need something just to feel normal. I glanced at Paul, who gave a subtle nod. He handed me another file, this one from Elaine. You mean like this? I asked, unfolding the pharmacy records. 4 different doctors, 3 cities, 6 overlapping prescriptions. You've been doctor shopping for 8 months. Opioid stimulants. Want me to read the amounts? Madeline's voice dropped to a whisper. You wouldn't. I looked at her steadily. You already did this to yourself. A hush fell over the room. Someone in the back muttered, Jesus. Another whispered. She's using Tommy's face was pale. Madeline, he said softly. Is this true? Her eyes darted around the room, searching for sympathy that wasn't there. I needed them, she whispered. The pressure, the planning. I just needed to stay calm. I nodded slowly. That's what I told myself too once. She shook her head, stepping back, tears streaking her makeup. It's not the same. You were weak. I'm in control. But then her purse slipped from her trembling hand, hit the floor, and burst open. Dozens of small orange bottles spilled across the carpet, rolling under chairs and scattering at her feet. The labels gleamed under the chandelier light. Oxycodone, Adderall, Percocet. The symbolism was almost cruel in its perfection. No one moved. A woman gasped. A camera phone clicked. Tommy stared down at the pills. His voice was quiet but steady. You brought them here. To our wedding. I needed them, she shouted, sinking to her knees. You don't understand. I stepped closer. I understand perfectly. But the difference is, I stopped needing excuses. The officiant cleared his throat, his face pale. Perhaps we should... Tommy raised a hand. No, he said. We're done. He took off his wedding ring and placed it gently on the table. There's not going to be a marriage today. Madeline reached for him, sobbing. Please, Tommy, I can get help. I can. He stepped back, shaking his head. You had every chance to tell me the truth. The guests began to rise, some heading for the exits, others whispering, phones buzzing, as the story spread in real time. The actors who'd stayed through the chaos finally slipped away too, leaving her alone at the head of a room full of broken illusions. Paul leaned toward me. She'll be facing charges, you know. Fraud, controlled substance violations. The works? I figured, I said quietly. But that's her battle now. Tommy turned to me, his eyes red but clear. How long did you know? Long enough, I said. But you wouldn't have believed me until you saw it. He nodded once, voice low. You were right. I didn't need to be right, I said. I just needed you to be free. We walked out together, leaving the chaos behind us. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. The storm had passed, but the air still smelled of rain and endings. Tommy stopped near the steps, looking back at the building. You think she'll ever understand what she did? Maybe, I said. If she's lucky enough to get honest before the next lie kills her. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he hugged me hard. I'm sorry, Dad, for everything. I put a hand on his shoulder. Don't be. You just learned the difference between love and illusion. Most people never do. Behind us, the sound of sirens grew faint in the distance. I didn't look back. The truth had already done its job. As we walked toward the car, Tommy asked quietly, What now? I smiled faintly. Now we go home. The right kind of home. By Sunday morning, the story was everywhere. Headlines blared across every news feed. Texas bride exposed for hiring, fake family addicted heiress scandal rocks Desert Hill wedding. There were videos too, grainy cell phone clips of the pills spilling across the ballroom floor. The crowd gasping, Tommy's stunned expression frozen in time. Reporters called, emails poured, in the phone at True North Recovery rang non-stop. I didn't answer any of them. I sat at my desk, coffee going cold, watching the rain slide down my office window. The world didn't need my commentary. The truth was speaking loudly enough. The door creaked open behind me. Elaine stepped in, still wearing her hospital badge. "You look terrible," she said softly. "You sleep at all?" "Not much," I said. Every time I close my eyes, I hear her voice right before it all fell apart. "She checked herself into Desert Haven last night," Elaine said. "Court ordered, but still, it's a start." I nodded slowly. "Good. Maybe she'll find the same mirror I once had to look into." Elaine leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You did the right thing, Richard." "Funny," I said. "Doesn't feel like it." She studied me for a moment. "That's because doing the right thing never feels clean. It just feels necessary." When she left, I turned to the window again. The parking lot shimmered with puddles. Across the street, a young man and his father were arguing beside a pickup, their words muffled by the glass. The son slammed the door, drove off, leaving the old man standing there in the rain. I watched until they disappeared, the image cutting deeper than I wanted to admit. By afternoon, Tommy called. His voice was rough. "Dad, I need to see you." "Come by," I said. He arrived an hour later, looking 10 years older than he had 2 days ago. His eyes were bloodshot, his suit wrinkled. He didn't say a word at first, just stood in the doorway, like he wasn't sure he deserved to come in. "Sit," I said, nodding toward the chair across from me. He sat, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "I keep seeing her face," he said quietly. "All those lies. The pills, everything." "How did I miss it? Because you wanted to believe her," I said. "We all fall for a good story once in a while." He looked up at me. "I called you rotten. You still showed up. That's what fathers do," I said, "even when they're not invited." He laughed once, dry and short. "You should hate me." "I don't," I said. "You were trying to love someone who didn't know how to tell the truth. That's not weakness. That's hope. It just hurts like hell when you learn the difference." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're the same man you were before her," I said. "You just learned what kind of people don't deserve your kindness." We sat in silence for a while, the only sound the rain hitting the roof. Then Tommy took a deep breath. "I want to help at the center," he said. "Not just paperwork this time, real work, talking to people. Maybe it'll help me understand how something like this happens." I studied him, recognizing a kind of resolve that looked a lot like my own from 12 years ago. "All right," I said. "But we don't fix others to avoid fixing ourselves." "Deal." He managed a small smile. "Deal." That week he started coming in every morning, sat in on group sessions, helped new clients with intake forms, listened more than he spoke. The first time I saw him share his story, his voice breaking as he said, "I almost married someone I didn't know," I realized this wasn't just recovery for him. It was redemption. Word about the wedding spread faster than I could have imagined. Within days, local news stations were doing special reports on fake identities and prescription abuse. True North's phone never stopped ringing. Some callers wanted gossip, others wanted help. Elaine stopped by one afternoon, waving a newspaper. "You made the front page," she said. "They're calling you the father who exposed the truth." I laughed softly. I didn't expose anything. I just stopped pretending. Same thing she said. That night, I checked the center's voicemail. There were 3 messages that stuck with me. The first was from Marcus, my youngest client, Mr. Hall. I heard about what you did. My girlfriend's parents hate that I'm in recovery. But after watching you stand up to that woman, I told them my story anyway. They didn't leave. Thanks for showing me I could. The second was from an older man's voice I didn't recognize. You don't know me, but I saw the video. I've been sober 9 years, but my daughter still won't talk to me. You reminded me not to give up trying. And the third was from someone quiet, almost whispering. My dad's in recovery too. I'm going to call him tonight. I listened to that one twice. Then I deleted them all and sat back in my chair, eyes closed. By Thursday, the storm had shifted from scandal to something else. The state's pharmacy board confirmed an investigation into fraudulent prescriptions tied to Madeline's name. Paul called to tell me the FBI had taken over the financial side money laundering through S. Morrison Financial Services. She's looking at real prison time, he said. But she's cooperating. Maybe she'll get help this time. Good, I said. She deserves a chance to face herself. Friday morning, Elaine stopped by with a small envelope. Came through my office, she said. Thought you should see it. Inside was a handwritten letter. Mr. Hall, it began. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even deserve it. But thank you for forcing me to see who I became. I used to think your kind of recovery was weakness. Now I know it's courage. I hope one day I find mine. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into the back of my notebook. That's enough, I said. Tommy walked in later that afternoon, holding a box of supplies for the group room. Full house tonight, he said. Half of them came because of you. Because of us, I corrected. He grinned. You think they'll ever stop bringing up the wedding? Eventually, I said. But stories like that, they teach more than they shame. That evening, we ran a joint session. Tommy led part of it, talking about deception, about how addiction isn't just about substances, but about pretending. When he finished, a young man raised his hand and said, So what do you do when you lose everything? Tommy looked at me, then said, You start telling the truth. When everyone left, the room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Tommy lingered by the door. You were right, he said softly. Truth hurts like hell, but it heals faster than lies ever could. I smiled. Now you sound like your old man. We turned off the lights together. The hallway outside smelled like coffee and rain. On the drive home, the city felt peaceful for the first time in months. Streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt, turning the world into streaks of gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Elaine, National Recovery Forum, wants you to speak next month. Topic: standing tall after shame. I laughed to myself, shaking my head. Hell of a title. When I pulled into my driveway, the rain had stopped. I sat in the truck for a moment, looking at the porch light flickering on its own timer. For the first time since the wedding, I didn't feel the weight of it all pressing down on me. I just felt steady, like a compass finally pointing home. I got out, locked the truck, and whispered into the quiet night. Legacy isn't about being perfect, Maggie. It's about standing up when everyone else looks away. 3 months later, the world had moved on, but I hadn't, not completely. The headlines were gone. The gossip had dried up, and even the recovery forums stopped mentioning the wedding scandal. Still, some mornings I'd catch myself staring out the office window at the parking lot, half expecting to see Tommy's car pull in, and Madeline step out beside him, smiling like nothing had ever happened. But that chapter was finished. What remained now wasn't drama, it was rebuilding. The first sign of peace came quietly. One Tuesday morning, I walked into the group room at True North and found Tommy leading the session without me. He stood by the whiteboard, sleeves rolled up, marker in hand, his voice steady and sure. You don't earn respect by hiding your scars, he was saying. You earn it by showing people you survived. The clients nodded, some smiling, some crying. It hit me then, my son wasn't just healing. He was growing into someone better than I'd ever hoped he'd be. After the session, he found me standing in the doorway. You were listening, he said, smirking a little. Couldn't help it, I replied. You stole my best line. He grinned. Guess I had a good teacher. That afternoon, we sat in my office, going through intake forms. Elaine says the center's expanding again, Tommy said. We might need another building. Maybe 2, I said. There's a waiting list now. He hesitated. You think that's because of what happened? I looked at him. Partly. People saw the truth in real time. It reminded them that addiction doesn't just live in back alleys. It hides behind designer dresses and perfect smiles, too. He nodded quiet for a while. I've been thinking, he said finally, about starting something new. A program for families, people who don't know how to talk about recovery without judgment. I smiled. You're talking about breaking the silence before it breaks them. He leaned back thoughtful. Yeah. Like what you did for me. That night I drove home through the soft glow of sunset. The air smelled like cut grass and barbecue smoke, and for the first time in a long time, I felt light. When I reached my street, I noticed something sitting on the porch, a small brown envelope with my name written in unfamiliar handwriting. No return address. Inside was a folded letter and a photo. The letter began, Mr. Hall, I don't expect you to believe this, but I'm doing better. Desert Haven's tough, but I'm clean for 47 days now. They tell me to write letters of accountability, and you're the first name that came to mind. I used to hate you for exposing me. Now I realize you saved me. I didn't just fake my family, I forgot how to be part of one. I don't know what comes next, but I'm trying to find out. It was signed Madeline Carter, or whatever my real name means again. The photo was of her in a hospital courtyard, hair shorter, face pale, but real. This time no makeup, no filter. I stared at it for a long moment before folding it carefully and setting it beside the framed picture of Margaret on my desk. Looks like someone else decided to start over, I murmured. The following week I spoke at the community forum Elaine had arranged. The room was packed, recovering addicts, family members, counselors, even a few reporters. I stood behind the microphone looking out at the crowd. They asked me to talk about shame, I began. But shame's not really the enemy. Silence is. Shame loses its power when you tell the truth out loud. I saw Tommy in the front row nodding. When my son called me a rotten old man, I said I thought I'd lost him. But the truth has a way of waiting for you. It doesn't shout, it just stands there patient as a mirror until you finally have the courage to look. A woman in the back raised her hand. How do you forgive someone who lies to you like that? I smiled gently. You don't start with forgiveness. You start with understanding. The rest comes when they stop lying to you and to themselves. When the talk ended, people lined up to shake my hand. Some were crying. One man, maybe in his 50s, whispered, "My daughter's been using." I've been too afraid to tell anyone. You gave me the push I needed. I just nodded. That was enough. Afterward, Tommy and I walked out into the night together. The air was cool, the sky clear. You know, he said, I thought you were crazy that night at the wedding. Now I get it. Sometimes the only way to save someone is to let the lie burn down around them. I glanced at him. You're sounding more like a counselor every day. Guess it runs in the family, he said. The months that followed were steady and quiet. The FBI finished its investigation, and Madeline took a plea deal, 18 months in a monitored rehabilitation program instead of prison. Elaine kept me updated every few weeks. She's working through trauma now, she'd say. For once, she's not pretending. I didn't ask for more than that. Sometimes the best thing you can give someone is distance. Spring turned to summer, and one evening Tommy came over with takeout and 2 cold beers. We sat on the porch watching the sunset over the neighborhood. He looked out toward the horizon and said, "You ever think about what Mom would say if she saw all this?" I chuckled. She'd probably say, "Took you long enough." He laughed quietly. Yeah, she would. We sat there in silence for a while, the cicadas humming the air warm. After a few minutes, Tommy said, "Dad, you ever regret not walking away that night, just letting me learn the hard way?" I shook my head. "You did learn the hard way. I just made sure it didn't destroy you first." He nodded slowly. "Thanks for not giving up on me." "Thanks for coming back," I said. A car passed down the street, headlights sweeping across the porch. For a moment, everything glowed gold, the photo frames in the window, the porch swing, Tommy's face. Then it was gone, leaving just the sound of the night. Later, when he left, I stayed out there a while longer, the hum of the summer air wrapping around me. I thought about the people we'd lost and the ones we'd saved, about how recovery wasn't just about sobriety. It was about honesty, even when it burned. Inside, I opened my journal and wrote one final entry for the year. Truth hurts. Lies destroy. Love rebuilds. Before I turned off the light, I looked at the photo on my desk, Margaret smiling beside a younger me, Tommy as a boy between us. Then beside it, the photo of Madeline at Desert Haven, her face unmasked. Both pictures, in their own way, were about redemption. I closed the notebook and whispered, "All right, Maggie, we did our part." As the night settled in, I thought about all the people out there still hiding behind lies, still afraid of being seen. For them, I wanted to say one last thing. If you're watching this, don't let shame decide your story. Tell the truth, even when it shakes. It might break the life you knew, but it'll give you one worth living. And if you've been hurt by someone else's lies, remember, healing isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your peace. Drop a comment below, share where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to choose truth over comfort, I want to hear it. Because every time one of us speaks up, shame loses a little more of its power. Thanks for listening and for believing that even a rotten old man can still teach the world something about grace.